Van, I'm going to ask you to come share your story, if you will. I contemplated having a victim come. I call them survivors because they're survivors. But they're utilized so much, and we don't want to put them in positions to where they are, subject to a lot of press at times. It's difficult for them, so I want to be cautious of that. But the next best thing is Van Hoy, and Van's going to tell you a story about a rescue that he came across and let you know about the situation here in Tennessee a couple of years ago. Van.
Well, thank you. This is unexpected, but a privilege to speak on behalf of kids. My name is Van Hoy, and I am the director of Leadership Sumner Youth Program, which is a youth program in Sumner County here in Middle Tennessee. And I, as you can tell by looking at the hair, I'm not an accountant. I manage bands. I'm in the music business. That's what I've done for 22 years. And my career has been primarily focused on using the stage to raise awareness of issues. And we've focused on child poverty, abused women, different issues around the world. We were able to build schools across Africa and Rwanda, working with several artists through a certain organization. And then had the opportunity to build the first high school and a whole race of people down in the Andes Mountains in Bolivia. And I had an opportunity with one of my bands, it's a bluegrass group, to do an event with Colin Powell up in Manhattan, and we did this fabulous experience, $1,000 a plate. I mean, it was the most extraordinary event I've ever been a part of, and I was just there as the manager of the band. And Colin Powell blew me away. He started talking about, don't just get involved in things that are in Africa and South America. You got to start looking in your own backyard. And he just kept talking about your own backyard. And his whole focus of what he talked about was getting involved in your own backyard and the poverty that is right here. Well, I sort of kind of shrugged it off a little bit because I'm thinking Middle Tennessee is the way it is, and it's beautiful, and I'm flying in and out, doing tours, and I had my eyes closed. Well, a couple days later, I was at another extraordinary event, and I started seeing something similar of this man, Colin Powell, and the excellence, the intensity that's in his eyes. You spend 5 minutes with this man, and you'll understand why he is where he's at. I started seeing that in some other folks when I was at the Grammys, and I'm telling you, I'm with the Bad Boys of Music and then Colin Powell, and they're very different people, but they had something similar, and that was an intensity. I got back, and we were involved in creating this youth program, and the very next morning, I had a meeting with the school board officials, and they started talking about all the poverty that's right here in Middle Tennessee and the homelessness in our youth and the hundreds of children here in Middle Tennessee who are homeless who go to school every day. And I said, what are you talking about, right? And Colin Powell's words are just echoing in my ears. Your own backyard, get involved in your own backyard, right? So I said, is this for real? Can you prove this? I know we can't all go and visit these kids, but can you show me? I mean, we've run our mouths and done shows and built schools across, countries, right? Why can we not get involved here? The thing about this place called Tennessee is, yes, obviously we have some severe poverty and we have issues that people don't even want to think about, such as human trafficking. But we also have extraordinary wealth. We have extraordinary people. We have extraordinary leadership in this community. So if these people knew about what was happening, I'm sure we could solve this, or at least address it aggressively. So they said, sure, we'll show you. So they take me down. Now I'm thinking I'm going to go and have a nice little tour. We're going to go through a few homes, meet a few families. So that's what we do. I brought a guitar sponsor with me, right? That's what I know to do. I brought a band, a guitar sponsor. I brought some folks from New York that actually put on the event for Colin Powell. I asked them to come in. I said, hey, there's a difference in American poverty and world poverty, and that is we all have a bias against it. See, we all think that I made it or my grandfather made it. Why can't they? See, we do have a bias. And so I said, I want you to come because I want you to help me overcome my bias. I said, help me see what I'm not seeing when I walk in this place. Little did I know, we talked these packets that they're talking about, helping you understand the signs to look for when you encounter a child who could be in this situation of trafficking. Well, I didn't have one of those packets. And I'll tell you what happened as I go into this home, this shack, just to meet this family and see what we can do. What can we do to help improve your life? And that little girl there who still has that spark in her eye, you know, I can't go in there and take care of every poor child in America, right? I can't raise enough money, but we can sure do something to give her a lifeline. We can give her nice clothes for school. We can get her the supplies she needs. And if we do it through the hands of the teacher or the guidance counselor, well, that now becomes the lifeline. They're not going to remember the shaggy-haired guy they sort of saw somewhere. So they don't even know we exist. So I've said, let's go through these people. So let's give them some clothes. Let's put together a program. And as we started putting those ideas together, we went into this place, this home. I saw this little girl, and she made this comment to me, and I thought, well, that was kind of rude, right? That was a little precocious. She says, as I'm walking through the door, she says to me, "You can't come in here. No men on my birthday." And I looked at her, I thought, whatever, you know, because, I mean, we were coming in, this whole entourage, elected folks, and the bands, and all this stuff, we're coming in, and I went right over my head. And the lady from New York who was with that organization, she whispers in my ear and says, "Did you hear what she said?" And I said, "Yeah, she's precocious. She told me to get out of here." And she said, "No, what did she say? What were her words?" And I said, "You can't come in. No men on my birthday. It's my birthday," you know, that kind of thing. She goes, "What?" It was her 9th birthday. What 9-year-old girl would say, "No men on my birthday"? And I just stopped in my tracks, and I looked at her, and I said, "Well, what do you mean? What are you talking about?" She goes, "Find somebody to investigate this little girl. Something is happening." Well, sure enough, fast forward 24 hours, we sent somebody back. Like they said, you don't want to necessarily do it. You want to let the law enforcement well prepared. And they did, and they found out this little girl had been stolen, and it had been manipulated, and it's not a pretty picture, I'll tell you. We all want to believe that it is the little blonde girl who lives in the $500,000 home that it's this ABC afternoon special who gets snatched and then gets magically returned at the end of the episode. But sometimes it's complicated, and sometimes there's all sorts of things going on in their home that they were taken from, and needs and issues that they were going through that somebody else horribly tried to fulfill and then manipulate and use. So thankfully, the folks that were with us, they heard, and we were able to rescue that little girl. And yes, she had been taken, and yes, right here in our own backyards, just as the general said. So I appreciate the fact that this group is here and that this is happening. And, you know, I tripped into this, you know, so it's anything we can do is an honor.
Thank you. I just wanted you to hear that story of a 9-year-old girl right here in Tennessee that he fell upon that had been trafficked. And I believe you said that she had been moved from different states. Is that right? Her mother had given her to someone and had been trafficked from a few different states. So, that was an example right here in Tennessee. And another example, 2 months ago, would you share with us the story of a rescue 2 months ago that the police department made, the one you told me about this morning?
Well, I got to talk about Hartford, yes.
Yes.
They were our people. We have a unit inside Specialized Investigations that does prostitution investigations, and part of that uncovered some issues like that. So they're currently investigating, arrested one person, but it might be part of some other things that they're looking at.
Wonderful. And I know that we had a rescue in September. Derry, you can help me with this, of 2 young women that were brought here from Atlanta, Conyers, Georgia, in here, and the TBI did a sting and rescued them in September, if I'm not mistaken, through Backpage. So there are rescues being made, and these are some of the cases we just want to share with you. So at this time, I'm going to, actually we had a few more press come in. Lauren Murphy is new from Las Vegas to Channel 2. She's news anchor with Channel 2, and we're thankful that you came. Thank you so much. And Channel 4 is on their way. Like I said, AP is outside. We'll get some questions and answers from you after the session's over. And Chattanooga Times is also outside. So we're going to introduce Lauren Leanne right now. She's going to moderate the question and answer. So get those questions ready. Thanks.
Thank you, Yvonne. It's an honor and a privilege to be here today. I just want to applaud you all for starting the conversation. As we know, this is a long journey ahead. And right now, I'd like to open up the room for Q&A with everyone. We'll start with the press, Lauren.
How many of the traffickers that have been brought through the justice system, or how many have been brought through the system under these new penalties have been convicted? Did they?
I actually don't think we have those numbers yet. That would probably come out of the District Attorney General's conference some way, but we can try to get those.
And I have another question about the safe houses. Are the girls, do they have to stay there, or do they have the option to leave?
We can both add to that. I know for the safe house that we have in Knoxville, they have the option to leave. It's not a lockdown facility. One of the things that we encourage is for them to have the freedom to choose. After they've been forced raped so many times every day, we affirm their choice to stay. Now, certainly we're encouraging them to stay so they can go through the process. And restoration is a long process. I can tell you from the trafficking victims we've worked in Knoxville, we've had some that have succeeded and are still in their restoration process, and then we've had some that have returned to the lifestyle just because it's a familiar place for them, and it truly is a different mindset.
Now, do most of them go back to their abusers, or do most of them stay with the program?
Well, I know a lot of them will return, and sometimes for rescues, it can take 5, 6, 7 rescues for them to actually break away from their trafficker. You know, a lot of these traffickers are their daddies. They're their familiar place. They're the provider, the protector. And for some of them, they don't know anything else. Some of them have been trafficked at very young ages. We've worked with minors that were trafficked and now adults, and literally it has taken such a long process for them to literally to just recalibrate the way that they think to change. But there is that tendency to go back to their daddy or their boyfriend. Do you want to add anything to that?
I'll just add that I think it's important to realize that safe houses or shelters are only for a small portion of survivors. It works for some people. I totally agree there are different models, and the one that gives freedom of choice is what I would advocate as well. But some survivors can go back to families that were not complicit in the crime. Some can live independently, and they just need a lot of wraparound services to support them. I do believe we need to have a short-term receiving center here where law enforcement can bring victims immediately and have a safe place for a few days. It's one of the things that we're talking about developing here.
You can use your microphone if you want to hit the button, the red button. You prefer to use a mic.
Frank, yes.
I've got a question mainly directed towards Mark Wynn and Commissioner Bill Gibbons. I really, truly appreciate all that you are doing. And we've begun the MISO as an entity to try to bring communities together, generate conversations and collaboration that brings about change. Because so many times, many people are doing great projects, but they're not connected together. So what can be done to connect the legal entities in our state with the NGOs that are operating in Tennessee so that a lot of collaboration can take place maybe in the training area where trainers can be brought in to help educate our law enforcement agencies, or for instance, when there are arrests being made, that there's a place to bring the victims to serve together with the NGOs. How can we better connect the NGOs with the legal entities? I think that has to take place more from the legal entities coming down to the NGOs, as it's difficult for the NGOs to crack that into that. How do you think we can do that?
Well, obviously through training. I mean, I think there's been a veil placed over this whole thing of human trafficking, and now with the study, we've taken that veil off. We've exposed that we do have a problem. And what do we do about it? Well, first of all, from a law enforcement perspective, we need more training. And I think that training can not only come from law enforcement, but from NGOs. We have to partner with NGOs in this training. So I think that is very important. The fact of changing the mindset of law enforcement. You know, and you have to understand, when we come across a case such as this, from a law enforcement mindset, it's about arrest and prosecution. That's what we're thinking. Not that we don't have sympathy for the victim or don't want to help the victim. Before, we just didn't know what to do. So I think we must train our law enforcement to partner with not only NGOs but social services to get that proper help for the victims. But I think we also must be cognizant that we do need prosecution and arrest in these situations. So we have to look at it from a legal standpoint of there are some things we can do and there's going to be some things we can't do. When you start talking about talking to victims and who can talk to victims and things like that, that really starts to get into a problem of prosecution at the very end. And General Gibbons can talk more about that. Commissioner Gibbons, who's former General Gibbons. But you have to, you know, from law enforcement perspective, we need to find out who's behind these organizations, because many times they are organizations. Tennessee is so close to Atlanta, who is the hub of the country in this sex trafficking, that we're going to get a lot of that coming out of Atlanta. And we need to find out who are the people that's behind these organizations, who's funding these organizations. So I think with this training, we can delineate, you know, with NGOs and social services, what's the law enforcement lane and what's your lane, and what lanes can we cross over and what have to be separated.
Well, if I could add a little bit to that, I think today's event is a good example of how law enforcement and NGOs can really create a much better dialogue. So what we're doing today is a good example of it. But really, when you think about this, I think a real key is increasing just awareness among citizens of the problem, what to be looking for. As we have talked about a lot today, a lot of this is hidden, or if not hidden, at least unrecognized. So training citizens about what to look for, how to recognize human trafficking when it's maybe staring you in the face and you haven't realized it, is a very important part of this. And I think it's really going to be up to NGOs across the state to take the lead in increasing that awareness, working with law enforcement, providing that training. And it's going to take a team effort. And I'm sitting here listening to this, and maybe I'm kind of stepping into an area, well, I'll just mention it. What the heck? We have a network of child advocacy centers across the state, and they do a fabulous job. And it seems to me that because such a high percentage of this human trafficking involves minors, that they need to be brought to the table in this. They need to be part of this effort to increase awareness among citizens about it and to serve the victims of human trafficking. And I'm sure they already have been brought to the table to some degree, but I don't know if they're represented here today or not. But it seems to me that they are a very important part of this and need to be brought to the table to be part of the solution in terms of increasing awareness and in terms of serving victims. It's a great network of child advocacy centers that we have across the state. If I could add one more point on that, and it really involves kind of more collaboration. I don't really like that word very much, it's overused, but I'll use it here. The child advocacy centers across the state right now are involved in what is in an effort called Stewards of Children. And it is an effort to increase awareness among Tennesseans of child sexual abuse. That is an ongoing effort right now, and their goal is, as I understand it, to educate to train at least 5% of all adults in Tennessee about what to look for in terms of child sexual abuse. The theory being that if you can train just 5%, that's kind of a tipping point, and it actually increases awareness among citizens much greater than just 5% if you train that 5%. It seems to me that a critical part of that training needs to be the human trafficking aspect of that. So this is a great opportunity to collaborate with child advocacy centers across the state in terms of just increasing awareness of this problem. That's a long answer to your question, but I'm sitting here thinking, how can we kind of pull all these players together, and it seems to me that there are some critical players that need to be there.
Great thing.
May I add just one thing? Our organization is recognizing the need for this collaboration, and so we're actually in conversation with an area university right now about starting research just to find out who all the players are and what services do they provide and what populations do they serve and what are their restrictions. So we have all of that information at our fingertips and can then have one place we bring victims and assess their needs and then have them met by those available resources.
And I think also, if I can add, if there was any area that needed mandatory reporting, it's this area. I think sometimes we get caught up into when the child or whomever may want to be anonymous or maybe talk the official into not telling. I don't want this told. I'll tell you, but let's keep it. If you'll keep it. But I think we really need to look at some mandatory reporting in this area.
Oh, a question I can add on that one. With that reporting and then preventative services, how do we get our school boards to cooperate with maybe a training program that they seem resistant to that, and yet if it's going to be the children are going to be the ones who are going to be victimized, then it seems like there need to be some seminars for children in the schools. How do we reach this process?
Maybe that's a question for Representative Maggard. Maybe that's legislative.
I can also help address that, I think, as well.
Maybe
Your
we
personnel out to it.
we probably need to look into that. We access our schools already for so many things like education about bullying and health and eating correctly and that sort of thing. So that would be something that we could maybe look into. We're already got them doing a lot of things already, but certainly that would be worth looking into.
Be aware and protect themselves.
And we have the materials ready.
All right. I want to add just a bit there, and Christy may be able to help you as well. In Knoxville, we just recently had a great training program that Christy kind of headed up, and it involved all the service providers as well as law enforcement, the legal part as well. Christy, you want to touch on? I mean, you talk about the NGOs embracing this and bringing it to the forefront of leadership, and I think Christy can touch on it.
Well, Chief Roush is right. One of the things that we did as NGOs, we recognize that we each play a part in this puzzle. None of us can target everything, and so it is important for us to work with all of the organizations, both law enforcement, the prosecutors, all levels of our government, all the way up to Homeland Security, working with the Blue Campaign. And so we did, in our training, we had breakout hands-on workshops for law enforcement, social service providers, and for prosecutors. And we took it a step further because we can't train everybody. Derry's doing thousands of, training thousands of people. We're doing hundreds upon hundreds every single year. And what we did is on the second day, we added a second component to the training. It's not just an education, but they've got to know the hands-on. What do I do in my segment of where I work? And so we had to train the trainers. So the trainers for law enforcement and social service providers, so the law enforcement can take it back to their in-service trainings and implement a lot of the training into that program. And so it is important for all of us to work together and to have I know you don't like the word collaborative efforts, but it is. It's a partnership in saying each of us bring to the table what we can. And again, even, in working with KPD, East Tennessee is to me, and Knoxville is a model for some of the collaborative efforts, in my opinion, of NGOs and social service organizations working with law enforcement and not just staying in our community, but being a leader for other communities, because you have a lot of other communities that may not have access to the immediate training or may not have the education or the awareness that it's actually taking place. And so You know, Chief Roush and his team with the MCU division, with Deputy Chief Gus Paducas, has taken that lead. And I can tell you, even from tips that have come in from other counties, already taking a leadership place to provide some indication of how they need to pursue different cases that are out there right now.
That's great. Y'all have really set an example for the rest of the state.
I'd like to add, as far as the schools, you mentioned the schools and how to get them informed, right? One thing we've been doing in this area is I've been getting individual invitations and going at schools one by one, going and presenting programs to the teachers. And they are asking me to come back and do programs to the parents. So that's the beginning right there. I've spoken to probably 8 or 9 schools in this area in the last year, and they're very open to going in on one-on-one, as Derry knows. And I think that's the key, because when I'm trying to get them collectively as the school boards, they don't want to filter it down because there's so much overload and so much work. But if we go at them individually, talk to the teachers and the principals, and get that open door, they're very open for us to coming in one-on-one. Yes, you go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everybody. My name is Kathy Hines, and I thank all of you for being here. I have twofold question. One thing that is a very important thing, my background is in law enforcement. I've been in law enforcement for over 25 years. And you have to look at what I call the ridiculous points of views in order to get your point across. And the one thing that I have had a challenge with is getting an Amber Alerts kiosk at the VNA airport. And I'd like to know, what do I need to do to work with you guys to get that? Because I don't know how many of you have traveled this year or in the last few years. And if you understand how easy it is to get a child through the airport, all you have to produce is a birth certificate. And with the criminal minds being so able to duplicate an authentic looking form of identification or birth certificate, if you present this to an airline for a child that's under the age of 12, they'll give them a boarding pass. And that child's on the plane. 30 minutes, they're in Ohio. 45 minutes, they may be in New York. In an hour, they're in another country. We have a significant responsibility to protect our children. I cannot thank Derry Smith, Yvonne Williams, Mike Sparks, Lori, everybody for all that they've done. I even approached Sherry Jones' office a few years ago, and I'm telling them about the things that I deal with because I'm a constant in Rutherford County. And what I think is another part of my question is here, what do we need to do to revisit the definition of the best interest of a child? That definition has not been changed in 100 years. Our children have changed dramatically. Their needs have changed dramatically. So in those two things, I'd like to know, what can we do? What can I do? Let me know, I will do it. And the other thing is, we have, Mike Sparks and I, we have put together what we call the 10-0 task force. It's a drug task force where I have gotten the help of Middle Tennessee law enforcement officers to come forward and say, we're going to deal with the synthetic drug issue. But from law enforcement, you got to understand, drug dealers are looking for a way to get out of getting their drugs taken, the cars ripped from them and everything. It's a forfeiture plan. But what they're doing now is putting down their guns, putting down their drugs, and they're prostituting young children. So we have to look at them. They're very, very knowledgeable about how to circumvent the legal system. So we have to be 100% better than them. So those two questions are my important facts. Thank you.
The Amber Alert kiosk, I would turn you to talk to Margie Quinn after the meeting. She's in charge of the Amber Alert program, and she can probably check on that for you.
Can you address that, Margie, now, or we'll talk about it?
Let me ask real quick, if I could. As far as social media, Director Quinn, what's being used? Do you think like Backpage, Facebook, are a lot of those sites being used to alert victims?
Yeah, I think they are, and we monitor those sites, and it quite, no different than child pornography and the pedophiles and all of that. They use the internet, they use any means necessary, and we monitor those different avenues. But yes, they are.
One thing that, I want to make sure I don't come across being preachy or anything, but you look back at the family unit, that's and the fatherless rate, and I wonder if there's ever been a study done as far as the correlation between the fatherless, that child being without a father in his life and being trafficked. Have Margie or Mark, do you know of any?
I do.
95% of runaways are from fatherless homes, and over 50% of traffic victims are runaways. So we have a huge problem with fatherless homes.
Yeah, you know, one thing I just happen to see, it just seems like, you know, a lot of the answer seems like it's to spend more money on police, more money on jails, more money on attorneys prosecuting these folks. And there's not much of a voice for the family, you know, going back to the fatherless, you know, and young men who may be brought up without a father in the home. I know as a new legislator, we were looking at avenues that you could bring awareness to the fatherhood initiatives. And sadly, we couldn't really find anything. You know, there wasn't much out there, but I think that as far as a spoke in the wheel to try to solve these problems, the family unit is something that needs to be addressed, and the fatherless. Now, how do you solve that? I don't know. But Director Gibbons, you mentioned awareness. I think awareness needs to be there to where people at least understand that there's a, you know, the propensity for a problem to, it's just a cycle that's going to be never ending if we don't get to the root of some of these.
Sure, I think you're talking more about the prevention, Representative. Yes, we can just prevent, you know, we may not have to have these press conferences. We can look more at the prevention as opposed to being reactive, start being proactive.
I actually had a question for Commissioner Gibbons. You mentioned the report understates the crime. State troopers have 40 hours of training. Could you touch on what are the specific signs our troopers are searching for?
Well, there's no real magic to this. If you look at this handout and look at the questions posed on one side, those are pretty obvious questions. And without getting too deep in the weeds, those are the kinds of things that we are training our troopers to look for and to ask. And again, we are really emphasizing interdiction training for all of our road troopers. And while a lot of that is drug interdiction, we really think it's important to also have as part of that training human trafficking interdiction, because that's part of it. And anytime a trooper stops a vehicle on an interstate, that trooper needs to look at the circumstances, and if it appears to be a situation where a few more questions are warranted, those questions need to be asked. But it's pretty much along the lines of what this handout says. Just asking those additional questions maybe that may lead to further questions. And again, it's kind of a case-by-case situation, and you have to size it up. But you know, if you see a young girl or a young woman in the car who is kind of not very talkative and is seems to be afraid to speak, maybe that trooper needs to try to have some dialogue with that young girl or young woman to try to find out a little bit more. Again, it's kind of a case-by-case situation, but really trying to go that extra step to find out where possible if there's some unique circumstances that need to be addressed further.
This is a rather complex question, but it may also be something that very few people are aware of. Before moving to Nashville, I worked over 2 decades in Asia, Europe, and the Russian Federation, so I've seen human trafficking on the other side. I've seen the supply. And unfortunately, the United States creates the largest demand in the world. And that's something I'm very ashamed of. And with that, there are many avenues through which these people are trafficked to the United States. So on the one side, we're trying to protect their own children and our own people in this country. On the other side, we have much of our country are immigrants. And many of those immigrants are illegal. But many of them did not come here illegally. And I've met many students. There are student programs where they come over here to work for the summer, and their passports are confiscated. Or there's not a vetting system that really investigates and vets where they're coming to, who are their employers when they arrive here. And some of them become trapped in this country. And not only are they ashamed to admit that they're trapped, but they're also afraid because not only will their lives in danger, but if they would come forth, they would also be deported back to their country. So you imagine being raped and being destroyed and then being sent back. And so is there some kind of legislation that can be brought about that would protect victims of human trafficking who have come here maybe on a student visa or some other temporary visa but now are trapped and even passportless, to be protected if they could come forth, that they would not be immediately sent back before there's some caretaking of them? That's a very huge portion of the human trafficking is stuck in that situation.
You're right, that's a very complicated, complex question, and I don't mean to pass the buck on this, but really you're talking about a federal issue that would have to be addressed federally by Congress. And I don't think the General Assembly could do anything to address that. It's really more of a national federal issue.
I'll add something to that. Right now, under the TVPA, there are, whether it be a T visa, U visa, that once they're identified and certified through law enforcement or the U.S. Attorney's Office that they're a trafficking victim, there are resources available, including an additional visa that could allow them to stay so they're not automatically deported.
Well, that's great. We need to be educated with that. Thanks.
We have a number of agencies in the state that specifically concentrate on that, helping a trafficking victim who needs one of those visas.
Mark, do you know if a PSA or anything's been made by y'all or maybe Gibbons that bring awareness to human trafficking?
I was a part of, you want to talk about your? We had a PSA made. We did a PSA for Human Trafficking Awareness Week. You should have got a copy of it. Is it on our website, Hank?
It isn't, but I can get it there. I can also send you the link.
Yeah.
If everyone wants the link.
And if anybody wants a link to that, just let us know, or email Yvonne. You want to give me contact information?
Yvonne, YVONNE @rtvp.net. Email me and I'll send you the link. I think it is on our site.
And that's also on YouTube also.
It's on YouTube also.
And Commissioner Gibbons was gracious enough to give me his time, and I was able to get Director Gwen on the day that he just happened to be in his office, and he was gracious enough to give me his time, and it turned out quite nicely, and our editor does put it together for us, so we'll get a copy to you.
Well, one thing that could be done with their influence, Mark's and Director Gibbons, is to utilize maybe the municipalities, the counties, Metro, their Comcast channel or something. See if you could put that out there.
Sure.
I had a question for Commissioner Gibbons, but anyone here in the room can feel free to answer this. My mother works for the state of Missouri and for Children's Division, and she gets calls daily about the human trafficking thing, and one of the problems that she's brought up is Missouri included doesn't know what to do with the adults that have been trafficked, because some children have been trafficked for years, and by the time they're adults, sometimes they're still in it. So they're trying to figure out, okay, well, do we separate the adults from the children? Do we put them together in the rehabilitation centers? Do you have any answers as far as how to approach something like that?
Well, I'm not the expert on that at all, and there are probably some in the room who are. But it seems to me you almost have to separate them. You have to treat children victims separately from adults. And of course, in Tennessee, we have a separate Department of Children's Services. But beyond that, there are probably some others in the room who probably have more insight into how to do it, especially with adult victims. I'm looking at.
I'll just say, in general, it's actually been my experience that it's been easier to work with adult victims.
Has it?
Yes, and that a lot of shelters prefer to work with adult victims because they don't have all the laws to navigate through with DCS and Child Protective Services and child privacy laws and all of the other intricacies that involve children.
Is it possible that since the adults are easier to work with, that it's possible to maybe have them have one-on-one contact with children that have gone through it to maybe kind of help them?
I think it's really important. I know it's already been mentioned, but Commissioner Gibbons and also Director Gwynn, them doing the statewide training, how important it is. I know it's easy to say, well, we're getting information out, but it's really an important thing. They're getting information out, consistent information to each agency across the state, And that's really an important thing, is the police officers, lots of times, are the ones that see these type people. So I think that can't be, I mean, it's just really a great thing that they're doing, taking a step up on that. It's really encouraging everybody else to do the same. So it's really just a great thing that they're doing on that.
Thank you.
My name is David Gorbari. I'm a social work student over at Lipscomb University. And I just had a question. In terms of prevention, is there any efforts directed towards the Johns and the traffickers at getting inside their minds, inside their own personal history, what led them to that career path, I suppose?
You know, I think obviously once you may effect an arrest on someone like that, a detailed interview would have to go to that extent. And I'm not sure what the FBI is doing with their profilers. I'm sure that they are looking at, and profiling some of those people.
And I'll add two things. On the local level, the Magdalene House runs a John School for men who are arrested for soliciting.
Slavery aspect, and I didn't even know it, but in Antioch I actually encountered a girl who was being human trafficked at a restaurant that I frequented. I had no idea. She had stepped off a bus, and it was an undesignated bus stop, and she was being trafficked right under everyone's noses. Some of the materials actually donated to this project. The place that she was being trafficked was right next to this art supply store. And he said, I knew it. I knew people were being trafficked. I didn't realize it, and he's like, just whatever you need, whatever you need. So my question is for the businesses and the proprietors of businesses, how can we partnership and pledge? How can we go forth and be part of this and part of the solution, not only monetarily, but information-wise in the community with other businesses that recognize what's going on? Be nice to be able to have a centralized place either online or in person where people can call as businesses and be educated to spot this and record the activities and be able to actually testify, just like this gentleman at this art store. He's the manager, and he said, I want to testify if it ever comes up. So that's my question.
I'll add something to that. As the director just mentioned, first of all, you can always call the Tennessee hotline, which you'll now have that. There are also flyers that the Tennessee hotline have created that you can post up in your place of business. But one of the things as NGOs, we love partnering with businesses of all sizes. There's certainly ways that you can partner with a local NGO in your area.
For being here and starting this dialogue collectively. In May, we're having a conference in Nashville, a 3-day event. So this, I think, began a lot of conversation that needed to start, and we continue it there. And next year, a year from now, we're going to have another event like this with the press, and we're going to say what happened in the 12 months that we are fixing to go through in relation to human trafficking. I'm already working to reserve the capital for next year, so it's going to be nice. But thank you so much, all of you that attended. I want to introduce also Lawrence Harrington from the Attorney General's office that came in, and thank you for coming. AP is outside, would like to speak with you folks if you give them a few minutes of your time, and also the Chattanooga Times. Have some refreshments, enjoy yourself, and thanks again. God bless.